Couple things to keep in mind though. This is the skull that's used for the exam. Okay? We refer to it as the white skull because it's not painted any colors, right? You have all the bones and parts here, but they all look the same. This is the colored skull, and it's a teaching tool where they try to paint a different color, and sadly, for some reason they didn't use a different color for every bone. Sometimes they use the same color for two different bones, which is weird, but to try to show you the different bones of the skull in a slightly different color. Now, what you're going to find if you look at the listing in the module, like in the lab class, the lab folder, it says the lab modules that have that list of all the different bones, you'll see, the name of the bone, and then there might be one or two parts after it, and then the name of another bone. Some have no parts. Some have multiple parts. Just gotta look at that list and try to figure out which one is which. Okay, this is a part that's supposed to be in here, but it doesn't stay, so I'm just keeping it out on the side from it. This is its own bone. This is the vomer, and it's one of the bones of the skull. That is it. That's the bone, and it's supposed to be, I'll just try to put it in place. It's supposed to go down the center of the nose. Okay? And you have that opening, the nasal cavity, that air goes in and out. That bone is supposed to be like a wall that separates the right from the left. That's its own little bone called the vomer. It belongs in there. Like I said, this is mandible. This is skull. There is some piece missing here. Okay, that's I think the only piece that's missing. This yellow one is missing from here. That's okay, we could use this side. Okay, so let's go through the names. So this is the mandible, and you see there's lots of little different parts to the mandible, little things sticking off, little indentations. So the bone name is mandible. What are the parts? Well, mandible is easy to do. It has a very clear picture in the book. Everything's pointed out pretty nicely. A lot easier to see on here than some of the other parts that are on here, but the whole thing is mandible. From here to here, all of this, it's called the body of the mandible. Okay. The teeth fit into the body, right? So you see the teeth here, they're embedded into the body. You'll look at where the teeth meet the body, you're going to see little ridges. The bone has like a ridged appearance. Those are the alveolar processes. Okay, that's where the teeth fit in. You'll see a little hole. That's a foramen. The word foramen means hole. That's the mental foramen. Now, holes in bone are so that blood vessels and nerves can penetrate to get into the bone or get through the bone, right? So you have lots of little holes scattered around. So you have the mandible, the body. On the body, you have alveolar processes. You have a mental foramen, and you have your chin. It's called the mental protuberance or mental process. It's your chin, mental protuberance. Now, there's some stuff on the inside, but we're not going to do the inside. Just stay on the outside. Here, from here to here, right? Okay? This is called the ramus. So from where the body ends up is the ramus. Ramus is one on each side. Okay? Where it bends, see it curves, that's called the angle. And then you got these two things sticking off the ramus. This one's kind of like a shark fin. Okay, that's called the coronoid process. Coronoid process. And then this part here is so that it can connect to the skull, right? It creates the joint, right? Your mandible has to be able to move. So this is the head of this part here that actually connects, this round bulbous part. That's the head on the condyle, okay? This is called the condyle. And this is the head of the condyle. Condyle means where there's going to be some sort of joint implication. Mandibular condyle with the head, mandibular head. And that forms what's called the temporal, because this is the temporal bone, as we'll see in a moment, mandibular joint. Temporal mandibular joint, the TMJ. You've heard of the TMJ. People have pain with the TMJ, clicking in the TMJ. Sometimes they open their mouth and then it gets locked and they can't close it. That's the temporal mandibular joint. That's where the mandible meets the skull. Coronoid, mandibular condyle, head, ramus, body, mental foramen, mental protuberance, mental process, and alveolar processes, the little ridges. These are parts of the mandible. So that is a station on the test. And, you know, you're asked to name this, or this, or this, or the ridges. And that's really what it comes down to. All right? Probably have 2 questions on this bone, and 2 questions on this bone, and so on and so forth as we go around. This probably won't be on the test. A loose bone like that from the skull probably won't. Yes, will be. Now, again, you know, trying to match up this to this is the first step, and again, this doesn't want to stay in place per se, but this one is the frontal bone. Okay? Each one of these is going to have a name. Now, the frontal bone, does it have parts associated with it? It does. Very basic. On this, they're almost non-existent. On this one, kind of exist. So the parts that are probably listed on the website in the module for the frontal bone are probably this line here, where the frontal bone connects to the parietal bone, and right here. Okay, so this is what's known as the orbit, right? The orbit, where the eyeball is. So this superior border of the orbit up top here is part of the frontal bone. In the human skull, there's supposed to be a little tiny hole. You see this little hole beneath, there's a little hole underneath the orbit. Well, there's supposed to be a little hole there above that. Now, even on this skull, this one doesn't have the hole either. What this one does have is a little notch. Okay, so it's a smooth edge, except there's a little rough notch in it. All right, so on this one we have a notch. On this one we have neither notch nor hole. There's supposed to be a hole. Sometimes there's only a notch. That's called the supra, meaning above, supraorbital notch. So you may see listed under frontal bone, you may see supraorbital notch listed, supraorbital foramen listed, the hole that is typically above that. Unfortunately, I don't think any of our models have the hole, the foramen. Most of these white ones have the supraorbital notch. And that's for a blood vessel running through that notch. Like I said, the other thing would be here, the connection between this tan and the green, the frontal and the parietals. where two cranial bones meet. That junction is called a suture. And they're ragged edges that lock tight together. So this is one of many sutures. Okay? Now this suture runs in a specific plane, as does this one. This is in the sagittal plane. This is in the coronal plane. They call this the coronal suture. They call this one the sagittal suture. I wish they were all that simple. So for the frontal bone, we put with it the suture, coronal. We put with it supraorbital notch, possibly supraorbital foramen. Those are the parts that are associated with the frontal. Okay? The frontal with the suture. Part of the frontal here with the supraorbital notch. That articulates with the two parietals. There's only one frontal, two parietals, a right and a left, with a suture down the center, the sagittal suture. There are no parts to know for the parietal bone. Does the parietal bone have parts? Yes. No parts to know, just right and left parietal bone. Simple. Occipital bone in blue. Okay, is there a suture? Yes. Okay, this one's called the lambdoid suture between the occipital parietal. And you see the occipital comes all the way underneath, and it's the occipital bone that attaches to the vertebral column. So the skull sits on the first vertebral vertebrae like so. Okay, right here is the connection point. So you got one occipital bone. It has some parts to it. Okay, a large hole, easy to see, foramen magnum, large hole. These two surfaces here, that's the connection between the skull and the vertebral column. Those are called the occipital condyles. Okay. There is a little hole. Is there a stick around on any of the tables? A little stick? Probably not, right? Okay, well, if I had my little stick, the occipital condyles are here, right? The two condyles. There's a hole drilled right through the condyle. And you can see it, there's a little hole there. Let me get a little stick to put in